Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, Transforming Transfer Tactics, 3 Must-Haves and 3 Misses. I would now like to introduce Capture's Director of Undergraduate Initiatives, Jamie Gleason.
Thanks, Alicia, and good afternoon or morning or whenever you're listening to this webinar. If you're listening to the recorded version, it's good to be with you today. With all that's going on in the world of transfers, I wanted to use this opportunity to talk through some tactics and some misses and must-haves that are potentially common in the marketplace. And today I have two great individuals joining me, some good friends who I have worked with in the past, and I'm sorry, one second. I feel like I'm having some display issues. Alicia, you can tell me if I'm right or wrong on that. But I wanted to take a couple minutes to introduce my co-presenters who are with me today. Miss Darian Murtagh, and Darian Murtagh was listed in the webinar invite, but actually she has recently been married, so I refer to her in her maiden name, and Mr. Brad Camileri. So why don't I just pause for a second? I'll let them introduce themselves. And we'll start with Darian.
Hi, yes, my name is Darian Murtagh, or Darian Murtagh Leader, and I am the Director of Transfer Admissions at Chestnut Hill College, located in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, and I serve our transfer population exclusively. So, we're really working for innovative ways to reach this really unique student population, and it's a really rich market out there. So I'm excited to share some of what's working with our institution, and also answer any questions that you might have as well.
My name is Brad Camileri. Depending on what you're able to see, you may actually see my picture, or you may just see a little bit of my suspenders there. But I am the Director of Marketing Strategy and Client Services at Biola University in Southern California. We're a private school out here, and I oversee our marketing strategy. I used to, in another life, be a transfer admissions counselor at another institution. So transfer recruitment and marketing is near and dear to my heart, and we're partners with Capture, and I've sort of pressed into this transfer marketing space together.
All right, everyone's going to need to hold for just 1 second as I try to. Did I do it? I think I got it. There we go.
I'm there.
Thanks for your patience. There you are. I apologize for that little technological faux pas, but that happens in the space that we're in. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jamie Gleason. I'm the Director of Undergraduate Initiatives here at Capture Higher Ed. I've been in higher education for just under 14 years, and my role here at Capture is actually an intersection between product and service delivery, and then also some sales components of that. But my main role is really to be the undergraduate subject matter expert, which is just I think kind of a fancy way of saying maybe I know a lot about undergraduate and maybe a lot about a little depth of undergraduate all over. So today's webinar is going to be just talking about transfer transfer items that are out there. And I wanted to start by framing this conversation up really by taking a look at what is the reality in the marketplace when it comes to transfers. And a lot of these statistics that I'm using are from the Department of Education and the Student Clearinghouse, and my good friend Heather Yush over at PTK has been very good with providing me some details about transfer enrollment. But these little factoids are actually a very interesting reality within the transfer marketplace. 37% of all students will transfer at some point, and you can raise your hand privately if you want to. If you are a transfer student, I'll raise my hand. And Darian, Brad, did any of you transfer? Did either of you transfer in your undergrad?
I did not.
I did not either.
Okay, well, there we go. So that is statistically accurate. I'm 33% of this crowd that we're in. So we're pretty close to the average. 25% are going to transfer who start at four-year institutions. 45 are going to change institutions more than once. And then these are the ones that are amazing to me. This NACAC study that shows that 2/3 who are admitted to an institution will actually go on to enroll there. What that says to me, and maybe it says different things to different people, but it says to me that once a transfer drills into where they're going and they take the steps to get to that point of being admitted, then the likelihood of yield is quite high. And I think all of us have experienced that as we have been in the transfer marketplace. While the top of the funnel might be small, the bottom of the funnel is certainly usually very robust relative to the top. And then this final one is like the real, I think, is the premonition of the future, right? When I was the director of admissions, this was pre-capture in my PC days, or BC days before capture. I felt like community colleges were reaching up into the private education space and looking for my students. And now what we're showing is that the top tier institutions are also reaching down to try to get the same pool of students, and they're doing it in the transfer marketplace. And this is significantly, it's becoming more and more of a guerrilla warfare marketplace when it comes to transfers, because there's no out of bounds. And that's a little bit what we're going to talk about today. So why do transfers matter? And for those of you who are listening in, I'm not going to be the only one talking today, but I'm just I wanted to frame up the topic, and then I'm going to let Brad and Darian run. So why do transfers matter? And this is my take. Brad and Darian, I want you to weigh in on this too. But I think a lot of times transfers matter because they're super organic, right? They're so organic that it almost makes them hard to predict and hard to be strategic when it comes to enrolling them. They're super impatient. I used to say, maybe to Darian, or I've said it to a lot of people, but transfer students know what they don't want, right? They definitely know what they don't want because they've probably gone through maybe an experience like that before. And there's all sorts of unharnessed potential out there. We all rely on them to balance the budget. And so that's probably, for those of you who are, with us today, that's why you're here. Hopefully it's to gain a little bit of insights of how do we respond in this very kind of hand-to-hand combat marketplace that we're in. And especially, this becomes very important as we think about recent changes. So I'm going to pause here, and we're going to have a moment of silence for the canceled policies in the NACAC Code of Ethics. But I'd love to hear what Brad and Darian are thinking right now as it comes to the marketplace right now. What are these changes that are recently happening? What are they going to do when it comes to the transfer market?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm happy to jump in here. This is a place where the saying, if you're not first, you're last, is very, very true and daunting. With this new change, this means that everybody is fair game. And so if you're not someone who was in support of this change, that's okay, but you still have to throw your hat in the ring and be competitive with other schools that are going to be very aggressive with reaching out to transfer students who are enrolled at other colleges. So this on a transfer level, for someone who's in the trenches, this means that we need to shift not only our language, our direction, our marketing. Everything has to now adhere to the fact that other schools are going to be operating to this policy. And as you said, Jamie, students who are transferring, they've had an experience already. You're right. They already know what they've identified as a goal for them and what they've identified as something that does not work for them. So they want to hear from their transfer contact that we're going to be able to provide exactly what they want without all the fluff, without all the time spent. They're not interested in necessarily all the other things that a first-year student might be interested in on campus. They're interested in, will my credits transfer? How much will this cost me? How long will I be enrolled there? So you have to be very, very quickly, adaptive to this type of shift within the market.
Yeah, for anyone that might not be fully aware of the NACAC change, most of you probably are, but there's a chance that someone listening to this, either live or after the fact, doesn't exactly know. Effectively, the Department of Justice has said that colleges have been sort of acting in a non-competitive manner by having some of these code of ethics and professional practice principles that have sort of limited how schools go after or market to students that are enrolled at other colleges, and a couple other things as well. And so what the Department of Justice is trying to do is to say, hey, for the student's best interest, schools should be able to market to whoever they want, and students should be able to receive scholarships from any school that they, are able to get scholarships from, even if they're already enrolled at another institution. So that's what we're talking about here. From my perspective as a marketer, the key here is, I try to think about how I like to be marketed to and sold to, right? And while it is certainly true that as these sort of professional practice principles are loosened up, a lot of schools are going to go into this very aggressively. When I think about the sales tactics and the marketing that I most prefer, it isn't necessarily the most aggressive salespeople that I enjoy working with the most. It's the people that are most knowledgeable about what I need and want as a consumer, right? And I also like to be able to operate in self-service as much as possible. And I think transfer students really are the key audience for institutions like ours to think about, because they are, as Jamie mentioned earlier, they are knowledgeable consumers of college. They are more knowledgeable typically than first-time freshmen. And we should want to be able to really hone our skills at marketing and recruiting students that are knowledgeable. And so transfer students are going to hold us to this. If we send them stuff that talks to them like they're a student who's never been to college before, like they will let us know. They'll either let us know directly, or they'll say, hey, this is not the school for me, right? They're a knowledgeable student. And from a marketing standpoint, I always want to respect the person to whom I'm marketing and make sure that I'm providing value to them. So even now that I'm able to, as a marketer at a college, market directly to students that are enrolled at other schools, I still don't want to spam them, because I don't like to receive spam either, right? I'm someone that already owns a car, for example. I don't want to get just blowed up by every auto dealership in the area. I want a dealership that knows what I like, that is aware of what I've bought, that has some knowledge of who I am, and is sending me value for who I am. I think this is the same thing for transfer students. Even though these ethics principles have changed, we still, as marketers and salespeople, need to be able to make sure that when we're reaching out to students that are currently enrolled at 2 or 4 year schools that we want to entice to come to our school, we need to reach out to them in a way that is knowledgeable, that is measured, and that really provides value to them as well.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Brad, because I think even though this policy has changed, I think the ethics of a smart sale and of a reasonable product are going to lead us in the direction that is sound, right? We're gonna be looking at how do we find the best fit students, and what this potentially does is maybe changes the shape of that audience, or where we're looking, or even what methodologies we're going to be employing, whether it's financial aid tactics or different sorts. Sorry, there I had a little I don't know what, my tongue wouldn't work there for a second. Different scholarships or aid types or application types or anything like that to particular audiences. But this allows us to, like you said, hone our skills. Like how do we get better at it? And that's a perfect segue into what I think actually is maybe the first potential myth when it comes to transfer enrollment. And that is the lack of a strategic plan. You just mentioned this, Brad, and what you were saying, that oftentimes, far too often, right, we can fall prey to the very busy schedule that we as enrollment managers live in. And it's year round. I think there used to be like a couple of weeks in September where everyone could just like kind of take a deep breath and recover. But I think that altogether, too often right now, it's like we are just running from one thing to the other. And sometimes it's just so hard to like put down plans, or to maybe even more importantly, go back and like audit, how did that plan work? Or how did our attempt to do something what change did it really make, or how did we move the needle as a result of this? And I think transfers are they're a perfect opportunity here, right? Like we so often, in both institutions where I was a director of admissions, unfortunately, a lot of times what we did, we would take what was a comm flow, and we would maybe change it slightly. We keep the big picture points, similar, and then we would, say, well, this is an organic group of students that we have a hard time figuring out where they're coming from. It's hard to be intentional. Now, the good thing was I had staff like Darian who would actually challenge me and say, hey, no, we do know a lot about where they're coming from. We do know a lot about them. So let's customize this and personalize it. But that's what I would say. This doesn't have to be a massive strategic plan, but it's like, how do we like take a look at and audit, like, what are we doing? What are we providing to this group of informed consumers so that we can be strategic about their enrollment and that we can actually take a look at sourcing and planning. And one of the things we're going to cover later in the webinar is we're going to go over some beta results of a test that Brad and I went through this last year. But Brad, maybe you can talk a little bit about strategic planning from your angle. Like when you were getting ready to do this, the beta test, and we talked through it, like what were some of the things that you were looking at that maybe needed to be addressed?
Sure. Well, I mean, it's been a long time that we in college admissions have known and understood that transfers are important. It's been at least sort of 10 to 15 years for me in my career where I've known that I have to do something specific for transfer students. Just thinking of them as gravy is not going to be sufficient. But recognizing that and actually knowing what to do about that are two different things. And most of the levers that we knew how to pull for enrollment really were focused around high school students. I mean, you think about the idea of search, which has really risen in the last 20 years or so. The ability to purchase names of students who may not know your organization exists or your institution exists. A lot of that is based on tests that people take in high school. And between that and the various sort of principles of good practice that, are oftentimes sort of obscure and we're not really sure what we can do and can't do about transfer students that are enrolled at other schools, we typically didn't have too many like clear sort of marketing and recruitment levers to pull. We knew we could send people, admissions counselors and recruiters out to transfer fairs, but let's be honest, transfer fairs typically are a little bit hit or miss, or at least that was my experience. And I found myself here at Biola saying, listen, we have a pretty robust transfer recruitment plan, but from a marketing standpoint, like we're partnering with Capture. We're doing great guns on the traditional sort of freshman side, but there's got to be something we can do for transfers. And so I reached out to Jamie and said, hey, what can we do together to figure out how to leverage some of the things that Capture does well to give us more information about our transfer students and to reach out to them in ways that when the student receives an outreach from us, they know that we are talking to them as a transfer student, they know that we recognize them, and that we see them well and are providing them information that's going to be valuable to them. So that was really what sort of drove me to ask you, Jamie, what we can do together to sort of be better about a proactive outreach to this pool.
Cool. That's a good synopsis for those of you who are tempted to leave the webinar. We are going to talk a little bit more about that later on. So that's like a teaser for sticking around. Sometimes when you're on a webinar, I feel like you wait for someone to reply, but you're really just talking in a headset and no one can talk back. So hopefully you all are shaking your heads and holding your hands up in agreement saying, yeah, I can't wait for that coming up. I know that's coming up and that's why I'm going to stick around. The next common myth, which is unfortunately a part of so many offices and makeup on campus, is the fact that transfers are super impatient and they definitely don't like to wait around for answers. There's numerous departments that are involved in the process of, whether it's transcript evaluations or things like that. And if they don't get answers, then they move on. Darian has lots of experience in this, don't you, Darian?
Yes, absolutely. And I couldn't agree more. Like we mentioned earlier, transfer students really want that quick response as to how this will be a good fit and how we'll make this work for them. And so, something that has become so apparent and so necessary with making this a smooth process is developing relationships that are very intentional between key offices. Particularly, the registrar is one that I would pull right off of this list. Just speaking to what we've done over the past few years to make this a more smooth process is we've developed someone within that office who is designated strictly for the review of transfer application and credits. So this person actually we call a transfer technology specialist. They're housed within the registrar's office. And I would say this is my best friend on campus because this person and I meet on a weekly basis. We established a set of procedures and how quickly they'll take place. And so now a transfer student will reach out to me in the admissions process. They'll send me their transcript. And that same day, I have a conversation with my contact in the registrar's office. And within 48 hours, we've developed a credit evaluation. So students can see in live time up on their student portal how their credits will transfer right into the college. So having a designated person within that office is really paramount, and also having a relationship with them. Outside of that, I would say each one of these offices listed here absolutely take a piece of the puzzle. But the other really big one is going to be financial aid. And that's all of our students need those answers, to how much is this going to cost me? How much financial aid do I have left over because I am a transfer student? So having those answers to those questions right up front are very, very important. And again, over the years, we've developed that relationship with someone who is strictly designated to answering those questions in a very timely manner with transfers. Because if we're not answering them same day, next day, then they're getting these answers from other schools, and transfers will go to the path of least resistance when they already know what they're looking for.
Yeah.
Jamie, if I could,
oh yeah,
go
ahead,
I jump
Brad.
in real quick too?
Sure.
One other thing that I wanted to build upon what Darian said is that the time frame with which transfers are seeking this. Oftentimes, transfer students are seeking answers to these questions before they decide to apply. So if you're at a school that is not yet thinking about, being transfer friendly and sort of being front footed with your engagement with transfer students at the inquiry stage, I would beg you to consider that. Earlier on in the presentation, Jamie mentioned that 2/3 of transfer students across the country that are admitted enroll. Well, part of that is because transfer students, more than your typical first-time freshman, they're getting the answers to their questions before they decide to apply. Many transfer students are not going the way that a lot of first-time freshmen are, applying to 6, 7, 8, 9 schools. They've already gone through an admissions process once, and they say, hey, listen, if I'm going to write another essay and go through this process, I'm going to get the answers to how my credits transfer before I choose to apply. So just building on what Darian said, I would highly encourage you to make sure that you are not thinking of the application for a transfer as the first step of interest, but the application for a transfer student comes after typically they have decided that you are, if not the school, in a very small number of schools that they are looking to move forward with. So you've got to be able to serve them well, to answer their questions, and to know who they are before the application stage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
Absolutely
no, those are great points. And Darian has like a very actually both of our co-presenters today. Brad is located in Southern California. Darian is located in Philadelphia, which has the second highest per capita college. There's like 100 colleges within 100 miles of where she works, and she is not kidding that if they don't get the answers, then they will literally go down the street to the next college that is a close fit, and that they will move on. So absolutely agree with all of that what you said just now. Common myth number 3, I think, is just passing up low-hanging fruit. Right? Transfers typically have a smaller circle. In the Philadelphia marketplace, again, they're basically coming from either a handful of feeder schools that are consistent, but potentially missing some of those students who have made financial decisions and then opted to go to a community college, opted to go to maybe a gap year program or something like that, and then missing the opportunity to put them back into your transfer enrollment pool for years later. I'm saying this right now from a historic mindset because with the NACAC regulation now being changed, I feel like the clearinghouse list now becomes the ability to market to almost all audiences who have been admitted or applied. Obviously, they've had an interest in your institution already, and they're going to want to, they're, in my mind, they're the potential customer that holds the most opportunity because they've already looked once. They have some brand, affinity potentially, and be able to kind of get back on that horse. But then also, I think a few of the other things that I think are missed a lot, and sometimes probably because of time, is that we don't leverage articulation agreements enough in the transfer marketplace, and we're often not present on the feeder schools that are of the most interest. So I think those two things I know that Darian has addressed a lot when she and I used to work together at Chestnut Hill. One of the things that she would often do is be out there and be present on the campuses. So Darian, tell us about how that has impacted, your transfer enrollment recently.
Definitely. So both of those feed one another. Leveraging the articulation agreements and not being present are absolutely two low-hanging fruits that are often missed. As Brad mentioned in the previous slide, these transfer students are not coming to us, having not answered their questions. These questions are being answered at the time of these articulation agreements. So just for anyone who isn't aware of what these types of agreements look like, essentially it's agreements and partnerships that we have with local community colleges and local two-year colleges where we're talking to these students upon entrance into those programs. So we're giving them a plan of action from the moment they enroll at the community college that could be 2 years old by the time they come to our door, but that's how early these conversations are happening. So these articulation agreements somewhat offer them a safety net, showing them if you complete X, Y, and Z here at the community college, you're going to be perfectly on track to matriculate into Chestnut Hill College upon receipt of your associate's degree or sometime sooner. But being present on those campuses to not only promote those agreements, but give a face to them and really make them much more brand aware is absolutely paramount. And I joke often with my staff that, one of our local feeder colleges, our community colleges, actually, I'm there so often that the security officers there think that I work on that campus. So that's how intense these relationships should be. People will stop by and buy me coffee because they know what I drink because I'm there so often. So it's definitely having that approachability on the campus that is feeding you that is more important than anything. But having also the materials and the outreach to communicate what you can offer to their students is each one of those three things are just, it's absolutely irreplaceable. If these things are not happening, if the agreements are not set up, and if you're not there to represent them and speak to them and speak directly to the students about them, then you really are shooting yourself in the foot, because that is where the low-hanging fruit is. Those students are looking for a plan. So having that plan starting day one at the community college and having them funnel right into your programs on campus when they transfer is really the way to set that up.
Yeah. And we should also say too, articulation agreements are difficult to initially navigate. They take a lot of work and a lot of departmental interaction. But I think what Darian said is absolutely right on point, because they will pay their own wages for the next number of years, or however long the agreements last. And if nothing else, it creates that relationship between your institution and the feeder institution that then can foster into so many other things. The last bullet point I have here on the common myths is leaving interested leads on the table. And really what I mean by that is on the website. I think transfer and first year students are somewhat different this way, in that I think transfer students do often appreciate the cut to the chase approach and the potential, they actually might like to talk to people, whereas first year students maybe not so much. But I think being able to grab their interest and personalize some interactions with them while they're on the website is actually something that more and more we're going to see as commonplace in the market. And we have to just figure out a way to kind of best address this. So that's going to switch us right over to the 3 must-haves. And this is the first one because I think actually this one is very important. And I think it's not only think, I mean, I'm kind of putting my stock in this one as being a way of the future. Marketing automation, what does your website do for you in terms of turning anonymous web visitors into actual inquiries, because you know what their web behavior has been, and kind of how to display a message that shows that value that Brad addressed earlier on, early in the pipeline. So maybe it's their second or third visit to the website, maybe it's their first visit to the website, but all they're doing is clicking on transfer related URLs. How do we display content that speaks to them and kind of increases that speed to lead? They have a short set of questions. They need critical information. How do we basically offer that information to them quickly in order to get them to kind of take that next step and push them to the next step? And what I'm showing here on this particular slide is actually just a few examples. One from Biola up here, basically trying to grab the opportunity to present something to a transfer student. So whether it's a transcript evaluation appointment, whether it's an instant decision day, or maybe even a campus visit day that you're planning for transfer students, how do we get them to proverbially take the bait in order to take the next step and move forward? On the far right side of the screen, what you see is actually FoState is the capture fake institution that we have created. It's got a beautiful campus, really good student to faculty ratio. And
how's the cafeteria?
The food is great, all organic,
grass-fed,
everything. On the right side, what we have is what we call a progressive identification form. And let me just shape this. For those of you who are unfamiliar with some of the things that Capture does, this is one of the things that I most love about our technology. Let's say you have an anonymous IP address that's on your website, clicking around transfer only URLs. We can actually program this type of dynamic content to show up to an anonymous lead, someone who we have no idea who they are, but all they've been doing is kind of clicking, whether it's admissions and transfer, or transfer and admissions, maybe going over to financial aid. They basically have a small set of URL types that they're going to. We can populate this in front of them and say, hey, give us just the slightest bit of information about yourself. And with that information, we can basically flip that around, put it into your CRM, and create an inquiry. And then we can actually build on it. We can ask more questions later on. We can ask survey type questions so that you can find out what's important. And there's just all sorts of different mechanisms that can be used to basically take that that student or that anonymous user who wants to be somewhat more hands-off and kind of ease them into the process of providing information so that we can speak best to them. And this, again, goes right back to what Brad said about us being professional informers of what our product is. And this is that taking the step of understanding who the audience is that we're talking to, and how do we best meet those needs that the needs or the questions that they have currently. Marketing automation is I think it's the way of the future. And it's actually rare now that you can kind of go on a website, especially a retail website or something like that, where it's not just something's popping up and asking you to chat. We're talking a lot today, so I'm gonna have to pick up the pace. I won't talk faster. I'll just talk less. I know you're all clapping right now. Need number 2, I think, is the presence of more digital. I put in the more cowbell there just for those who like Christopher Walken's SNL skit. It's classic. My kids love it. But need more digital, I think, is increasingly critical. Every year when I read, reports on e-expectations and different things that have been more traditional modalities of communication within higher ed, I understand the need for more digital. And it's really one of those things where I'm going to say this. I was working on a search just this morning, actually, for an institution that we work with. And when I was reading through some of the terms and agreements from the source that I was using, there was something in there that it stuck out to me. It was highlighted in bold, and it said, data acquisition lists that are used in email only should not be considered to be successful. They shouldn't be. They basically, I'll paraphrase just because it was too long and I don't have it memorized. But the basic gist of it was email only won't work. Let that soak in for just a second, because I think maybe for too long in the admissions world, we maybe have believed that email only will work, or that maybe email plus direct mail will work. And I'm not saying that any of those are bad, but I think that everything that we do within the enrollment space, and this is especially true for transfers, has to be done intentionally and has to be done with a lot of precision. So when I'm talking about needing more digital here, it's because students who are at community colleges they're on their mobile devices a lot. As you can see there, 4.25 hours a day. And digital also allows you to target precise geolocation in order to get the profile of the student you're looking for. So this is a critical need, within what we're doing in the marketplace, to not to replace email or not to replace direct mail or human interaction, but to supplement and to build on that and actually create more lead pool. I'm gonna go to the next one, and I promise that I'm gonna stop talking as much. I promise. Number 3 in the must-have is the expansion of transfer leads, and I think this is where Brad spoke to earlier, is like, how do we employ some of the traditional methodologies of undergrad enrollment into the transfer marketplace? So I've listed here, the historic one of the National Student Clearinghouse and how that impacts transfers, but then also PTK, formerly known as College Fish, and then social prospecting, basically turning social tools into lead generators. So using those progressive identification forms on Instagram and on Facebook and on LinkedIn in order to bring those students into your website as inquiries. So those are the 3 misses, I think, the 3 common misses and the 3 must-haves. And now what we'd like to get into is a transfer beta test that we did last year. And Brad's going to take over the microphone here in a bit to talk through some of the elements and some of the things that we did. But he already teed up for us, like what were some of the common themes that they were seeing. They knew they had, they wanted to be more strategic and intentional about transfer planning. So what he and I talked about, and this was like well over a year ago, was how do we build some of this funnel out for transfer students? So we built a package that had search, it had some direct mail, it was actually handwritten notes that were triggered on web activity engagement. We built a custom email marketing complo and a landing page, and it was incredible, right, Brad?
It was, yeah. So as with every marketing thing, we expect our next year to be better than our first year, but our first year was definitely successful. I mean, as I said earlier, as we sort of teased this, where Biola was we recognized the importance of the transfer market, and we recognized that we felt like we were limited at that time in what levers we could pull. So I worked with Jamie at Capture, and here's what we did. We went out and found a couple of different places where we could purchase names of prospective transfer students. The main one really being, PTK, the Phi Theta Kappa area. And we put them in a sort of a search email campaign. But at the same time, we also remarketed through direct mail, through Capture, to students that had applied to our institution previously and decided not to come, because we knew that a significant percentage of our transfers each year were actually people that had first looked at us as a traditional first-time freshman, but had decided for one reason or another to go elsewhere. And we didn't want to talk to those 2 markets in the same way, again, because transfer students, they really value being talked to with some knowledge. So even though they're both transfer students, we actually had 2 different campaigns, one for the people that had looked at us as freshmen and one for people that might not know we exist, that we purchased names of through PTK. We created that explorebiola.com, that landing page that was really tailored, even more than our current website was, to transfer students that were really sort of experiencing our school for the first time, to try to front load the data that they would most want to see early. And then we sort of pushed through direct mail and through those emails people to that landing page. Like Jamie said, people that were doing things on our website, we sent them those triggered handwritten notes to try to really establish that value and establish that sense that we see you well, and we saw a lot of good results from that. At the same time, I should say as well that we were doing in-house some digital advertising. Jamie mentioned the idea that you can target, so you can geo-target key areas. So we actually do digital advertising at our top 20 feeder colleges, junior colleges around. So we're sort of saturating those areas through digital advertising in-house while we were launching this beta with Capture.
Yeah, and I just want to stop for a moment, give some incredible props to Eric on the Biola team. He has an incredible capability when it comes to digital. Capture we do a lot of digital as well, but he basically owned that part of the beta, and because he was doing it so well, we didn't need to be doing it. We concentrated on some other things that they weren't able to do. And what you see in front of you is actually the results of that. So I want you to know Biola didn't only have 9 deposits for transfer students last year. All of this is additional to what their kind of normal their normal pipeline would look like. But we essentially secured 9 additional deposits that were basically traced back to the campaigns that we ran. And you know what? I think the big picture of what this test was like, this beta, was really how do we learn to do this more? How do we figure this out? How do we put these elements together in order to create a scalable and sustainable plan so that we can, unleash this to the marketplace, to the institutions that actually need it? And that's really kind of where we have pivoted from here. Capture is, for those of you who know us, we like to try to be on the front of what's going on. And my direct report came to me a while ago, months ago, and said, hey, we need to start thinking about transfer solutions and how do we put together something that will address those. So what I started doing is understanding what are the real goals that most institutions might have when it comes to this. And really this kind of points back to those pain points of where do we see the things that are missing? Where are the gaps and chasms? And where are maybe the most unharvested places? And I think that I came up with this list of what we really want to do. We want to uncover anonymous prospects who are already there, because we all know that the transfer prospects are on your website. We want to attract them based on the previous profile. We want to strengthen the message, and actually I would even go so far as to say make that a more personalized and more intentionally transfer message. We want to increase the digital, and also overall just understand how do we increase the brand footprint, and how do we harvest or move into areas or markets or geographies that are maybe less known to us, but where transfers are actually coming. So how do we do that research and understand that more? And based on all of that, based on the results of Brad's test, I actually did some digital tests with another partner of ours here in the Philadelphia area. I basically came back to the table and said, here's what I think we need to put together when it comes to a transfer solution. Here are the 5 elements that could or should be a part of that. And I won't go through this word for word, but I think that what you see here around the five corners are the kind of the pieces of that puzzle. Search consulting, as Brad said, we actually, admittedly, we had a couple of sources that I was a little surprised that they didn't turn into more leads. But I think that's a learning experience that we can take and say, hey, how do we either change that group? How do we look a little bit more precisely, or maybe ignore them altogether as a non-working transfer source? And then what are the other areas where we can look? And I think, again, bringing this back to the NACAC changes, some of this is going to be morphing over the next 24 months, and we're going to see it change. But I think this solution is really crafted for the specific purpose of creating those immediate wins that you see on the left-hand side there. The expanded pool, a stronger transfer-specific message, and digital ads that expand, drive results, push next steps, and items like that. We see a lot of our partners that work, with us in an integrated and kind of a holistic fashion. When we stack these tactics on top of each other, we see results. And we were talking before the webinar. Sometimes having a change of even 9 deposits when it comes to the transfer marketplace, we might think, oh, 9 deposits, big deal. And if you're Penn State or if you're a big school, then maybe 9 deposits isn't a big deal. But I think for a lot of the institutions that we work with, 9 deposits on the transfer level is a big deal. Like that is an extraordinary thing that we don't want to pass up. And especially as the marketplace becomes more and more competitive, we want to make sure that we have the ingredients built into our systems that are really addressing some of those holes, for lack of a better term. So again, why do transfers matter? Because oftentimes we ignore them or we kind of treat them differently, even though we count on their money for the budget. We often don't plan because they're organic. They can be impatient, and sometimes our processes don't keep up with their pace. And we sometimes we don't get the potential of the articulation agreements that we either do have or should have. And the gains that can be brought around as a result of this is that we can kind of move from that reactive admissions enrollment position to a more proactive recruitment model. We can use some of those historic measurements and profile analytics in order to build that pool. And then we can get the message to the students right when they need it to push that next step. And obviously we all know, like Brad said, in the last 10 years, 15 years, community college has gotten a lot of good press, right? We all know that there's an increasing awareness when it comes to college indebtedness, financial obstacles that are, there for the college shopper. And being in front of that and understanding how to get in front of that so that we can capitalize on that market is, I would say, critical for almost every institution that's out there, and hopefully all of you who are listening. So that is the end of the official part of the presentation, 1:48, which is great. That gives us a little bit of time if there's any questions that have come in. And so I will yield the floor at this point to Alicia, and she can tell us what potentially has come in through the chat box.
All right, thank you, Jamie. Let's see. As a reminder, you can still submit questions through the questions pane in your attendee control panel. Without further ado, our first question is for Darian. It sounds like you own a lot of the transfer work at your institution. This one's for Brad. Brad, what is the structure of your office? How do you both deal with first-year prospects, if at all?
So we have, on the admission side of things, we have a transfer team and a freshman team on the undergraduate admission side. The transfer team has 2 recruiters that really spend all of their time out of the office. You can think of them as sort of outside sales people, and they do the work that Darian was talking about being super present on transfer, on community college, junior college campuses. They are out of the office sort of all the time. My specific office actually is a different office than admissions. I work within university marketing, and I oversee our marketing strategy, including a team of people that do admissions marketing for all program levels, undergraduate, graduate, and online bachelors. So as a part of that, we obviously do transfer marketing as well. So we're closely connected with the admissions folks, so you can think of as sort of the salespeople. But my team are sort of the ground cover, the marketing cover for those recruiters and transfer counselors that are going out face to face, and that's how we work. So we do marketing for first time freshman students. We do a lot of that through Capture, but we do that on our own as well, and transfer students. But we also do marketing for fully online bachelor students, post-traditional students, graduate students, the whole shebang.
And over at Chestnut Hill College, our admissions office is actually divided underneath two directors. So the first year students are all overseen by a director of admissions as well as 4 support staff. So this could be counselors, people who are traveling on the road, doing recruitment events, and also doing applications on campus and meeting with students here on campus. Then we have one person who is in charge of our international student population. And then shifting over to my realm, I'm the director of transfer admissions. For the past 5 years, it's just been me in that office. And this year, I was given the ability to hire a support person. So I have one counselor working with me. So we really split a lot of the travel workload, and I do all the strategic marketing and planning for the transfer population.
All right, thank you guys. Let's see. Our next question is, this one's for Brad. It says, thank you for showing the results of your transfer campaign. We are observing the results in hindsight. Did you set goals prior to the launch of your campaign? How did you perform relative to them?
So to be honest, I don't think we really knew for the capture campaign specifically. We really didn't have a good benchmark for this stuff. And we have goals for transfer recruitment overall, but as Jamie and I worked together to launch out on this campaign, it was sort of a beta for us as well as for capture. We needed to sort of set what our benchmark was going to be. So we did not specifically have goals. Now I think Jamie and I both understood there was a return on investment goal that we were looking for. If we had gotten 0 deposits, we would have all realized like that didn't quite meet the goal, right? And even 1 or 2 probably wouldn't have met it. But overall, we didn't really know what we were going to get. And we have different measurements. So we paid attention to how many people were interacting with us through the landing page, for example. We have different measurements for the campaign that we did search with, where we purchased those names from Phi Theta Kappa. And we had a different set of measurements for the non-matriculants to Biola as freshmen that we sort of re-engaged. So that's important to know. Whether you're doing something with capture or whether you're doing a marketing sort of campaign on your own, you have to do the work up front to make sure that you are paying attention to the right things so that you can differentiate between what if one campaign worked but the other one didn't. If you just group them all together, and had we grouped them all together, we would have not been able to sort of distinguish between the two. So I feel like right now we were able to see certain aspects that worked better than others. Jamie mentioned that we purchased search records from 3 different sources, and we paid attention to how the sources worked in a differentiated way. So we know the one source, PTK, that really worked well for us, we're going to lean into a little more this year. And the other sources we're going to sort of pull back from, or at least reassess how we purchase from those sources. But all that to say, we didn't have specific goals overall. We just knew that we needed to track very closely so that we could set our benchmark. And we have decided to re-up with capture for this transfer campaign because we were happy with the initial results, but we expect this coming year's results to be better because we're optimizing and doing things more effectively.
Yeah, and I think that's a good point, Brad, because I think a lot of times, because transfer work has traditionally been so fluid and almost I would say institution specific, depending on where you're located geographically, depending on the type of institution you are or the program breadth that you have. I think that there's probably a big swath of goals and metrics that can be associated with different campaigns. And I 100% agree with what you said, in that there should be no equalizing among students who are previously associated with your brand through the clearinghouse and those who are brand new to brand new to the search process when it comes to entering. Those are different types. They have different needs. There's one that has a lot more of a specific needs to understand more about who you are. So to set those benchmarks the same would really be a disservice, I think, to any initiative that you had.
Yeah, the other mistake would be if we set goals with you, Jamie, based on our experience on the first-time freshman side, and we just sort of assumed that the same return on investment would be present on the transfer side. That would also be a mistake because we'd be comparing apples and oranges there. So it was important for us to really establish that benchmark. Jamie knows this, but I'm very sort of data aware and really try to drill in and make sure, try to make sure that every decision that we make is sort of well situated. And because we did not have a good benchmark, the first year really was about setting that benchmark. And now my expectations as we move forward this next year are to improve upon that.
That's Brad's way of saying the pressure's on.
Yep. Hey, it's on me too.
Yeah, I know.
Okay, we've got another question. It says, when you are going into new markets, what tactics have you used to find students that look like your current students?
Well, why don't I can use that one because we do this quite a lot on in a lot of capture campaigns. There's a few lookalike features that we have internally that we use, but then there's also some things that we use on social media and other digital platforms that actually help hone that audience. So there's a number of different factors and attributes that can be associated with that. Obviously, I think we're all most aware, of search parameters and how those search parameters can be drilled into certain things. But I think generally speaking, the most maybe robust and useful right now are those that are on social media platforms. So you can basically put age, and you can zero it in if you want to do particular areas of study and majors and items like that. Geography obviously is a huge factor. So there's a whole bunch of different filters that can be applied in order to identify, hey, here's the audience that we're looking for, and it's based on whether it was last year's audience or last year's the split of transfer students, or however you wanted to do that. But there's a lot of different modalities. Harder to go in probably over the call. It's harder to do. If that person has specific questions, find me on the website, and I'd love to be able to go into that a little bit more, because it can get pretty sophisticated pretty fast.
Sure. All right, we have one last question for you guys. Let's see. It says, do you all recommend any special transfer scholarships? We all know that they usually don't get as much as the first year crowd.
I can speak to this one. We absolutely do offer very competitive scholarships to our transfer students, and we offer the highest scholarship to any student who is a member of the Phi Theta Kappa organization. So generally speaking, with any school that we have an articulation agreement with, we offer a base scholarship for every student who is admissible. And then if they are a member of the Phi Theta Kappa program, we give them that maximum scholarship. And each of these scholarships is renewable every year that they're with us, and they have to be a full-time student in order to redeem the scholarship. So on our terms, our scholarships can be anywhere between $15,000 to $21,000 per year. And I can say that this is absolutely one of the largest marketing tools we use. It's definitely a showstopper when we're on the road. It is a very powerful tool offering those types of scholarships, and we have certainly seen a return on the investment.
In a similar way, we also have transfer-specific academic scholarships that are based on your college GPA. So yeah, that's a big part of our process as well. But again, the scholarships are one piece of it. But another key piece is that these transfer students, when they're thinking about costs to attend your university, yes, they're thinking about the per term or the per year cost, but they're also trying to figure out, between these 2 or 3 different schools I'm looking at, can I graduate faster from one school than another? And that's something for you to understand, is that the transfer students really are thinking about time to degree as a financial decision. They're wise consumers, and while yes, they want and deserve scholarships for their college work, they also want and deserve the credits that they've taken to help expedite their graduation as well.
Mm-hmm. I'd absolutely agree with that. The credits come up very often, and so being able to accept up to a certain amount of credits has really also been, something that is asked all the time. So on our end, we honor any credits that are within 10 years, up to 75 credits towards the degree, which is oftentimes more than most institutions are willing to accept.
Yeah, that's great.
All right, Alicia, I think we ran out of time.
Yep, it looks like we're coming to an end. That will be our final question for it. Jamie, if you'd like to send everybody off and
All right, thanks. I just want to thank everyone. Especially want to give thanks to Brad and Darian for spending the hour with us. They offer a lot of great boots on the ground information from the other side of the desk that I'm eternally grateful for. So thank you both. And to those who are listening in, have a great afternoon and enjoy the fall.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
thank you everyone for attending today's webinar, Transforming Transfer Tactics, 3 Must-Haves and 3 Misses. You will receive a follow-up email within 48 hours with a link to view a recording of today's webinar. On behalf of Capture Higher Ed and our presenters, thank you for joining us and have a great rest of your day.